Hi, and welcome to Reddit Confessions. Let me just drop you right into this mess, because I didn't expect a divorce threat while holding a spatula covered in pancake batter. But that's exactly how it started. She walked into the kitchen wearing my hoodie, the same one she once said smelled like old library and disappointment, and casually announced, "We need to separate. I can't keep pretending I respect you." Right there, in front of my half-burnt pancakes. She didn't even blink. I was holding the spatula like a sword and a paper plate like a shield, and she just attacked. Cold. Precise. Like it had been rehearsed in her head 100 times. I didn't say anything. I just let the pancake slide into the trash. Her name's Hallie, by the way, or as I now refer to her in my head, Exhibit A. That morning wasn't some big fight. It wasn't even loud. It was worse than that. It was flat. Emotionless. Like I was being let go from a company I'd worked at for free. She said I lacked vision. She said I was a financial fog. She said she didn't want to grow old next to someone who treats coupons like currency. And the cherry on top? I'm not leaving for anyone else. I'm just done carrying dead weight. I remember her grabbing her keys like she was heading out for coffee, not leaving her husband of 10 years. And me? I sat back down. Not to cry. Not yet. I just finished the other pancake. The one that wasn't burnt. But here's where it gets weird. 3 days later, I received a letter from a law office in Montana. Apparently, my late cousin Avery, whom I hadn't spoken to in over a decade, had passed away and left me everything. The man used to mine cryptocurrency in the mountains like some digital gold prospector. I thought he was broke. Turns out, he was a Bitcoin millionaire. Quiet, paranoid, and very, very rich. My account didn't just go up. It exploded. For dollars. 2 million. I stared at the number until my vision blurred. And here's the part that melted my brain. Exactly 37 minutes after that deposit hit, Hallie texted me. After days of silence, after leaving with a suitcase and 0 backward glances, she sent, "Hey, you okay? I've been thinking about you a lot." I didn't respond. The next day, she was on my doorstep. Hair curled. Homemade cookies in a pink tin. Wearing that same hoodie. Voice like sugar water. I made a mistake. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that I had already found her burner phone. The one she accidentally left behind in her nightstand drawer. And what I read in those messages made the inheritance feel like a trap. She stood there holding that pink tin of cookies like it was some kind of peace offering from a parallel dimension. My estranged wife, Hallie, suddenly sweet, suddenly soft-spoken, like she hadn't just walked out on me mid-breakfast and called me dead weight while my pancakes were still bubbling. I opened the door just wide enough to let her voice slip in, but not her. She smiled like nothing had happened, like we were picking up after a minor disagreement over movie night. Her eyes scanned my apartment, the same one she said was too beige to feel alive, and she laughed lightly. "I miss the way it smells in here," she said. "Still smells like cinnamon and dust." I didn't say anything. I just looked at the cookies. They were her specialty, peanut butter with little caramel pieces folded in. The kind she used to make during good months, back when we'd both sit on the floor and eat them right off the tray because we didn't own enough plates. That was before she got into luxury candles and avocado toast phases and a TikTok therapist who taught her the word emotional parasite. Hallie stepped closer. "Look, Curtis. I know things got ugly. I said things I didn't mean. But I think we owe it to ourselves to talk." I finally spoke. "What changed?" She blinked. "What do you mean? You said you were done carrying me. That I was a fog. A ghost. Financially stagnant. You called me sad oatmeal with feet." She gave a breathy laugh like I was exaggerating. "I was angry. You were cold. I was hurt. You were gone." She looked down and started fiddling with her sleeve. "I just want to start fresh. We've been through too much to throw it all away." That's when I stepped aside and let her in. Not because I forgave her. Not because I believed her. But because I already knew something she didn't realize I knew, and I needed to see how far she was willing to go. See, 2 nights before she showed up, I was packing up old drawers. I hadn't even meant to snoop. I was looking for the backup key to my storage locker when I found a phone tucked behind her old sketchbooks. It wasn't her main phone. It was jet black with no case, and when I turned it on, it had one contact pinned at the top. Mason. Dozens of messages. Weeks of them. Flirty, reckless, intimate. One, in particular, still makes my stomach flip. "He's clueless. I'll be free soon. And we can finally do that trip to Cabo." Another one. He makes me feel like I'm drowning in beige. You? You're tequila and sin. And just like that, I saw her for who she was. She wasn't coming back because of guilt. She wasn't here for closure. She was here because the money hit, and somehow, some way, she'd found out. So I played along. I invited her in. I made tea. I even tried one of the cookies. They were good, too good, and that somehow made it worse. Like she'd weaponized nostalgia just to claw her way back in. We sat on the couch and she leaned into me like old times. Told me about how she couldn't sleep without my side of the bed. How lonely it had been. How she regretted everything. But when I asked her what she'd been doing during our space, she hesitated, then lied. Just working. Yoga. Trying to figure myself out. I nodded. I smiled. But inside, I was already building the chessboard. Because if she wanted to play games with me, she had no idea just how far I was willing to go now that I finally had the pieces. And Mason? Well, let's just say, I'd already reached out to him. And what he told me made me question whether Hallie's betrayal was just the surface of something far darker. I'll never forget how calm Mason sounded. Not angry, not defensive, just comfortable, like a man who had no reason to hide. I had texted him from a burner app with a vague message at first, just said I needed to talk about Hallie. He replied instantly, like he'd been waiting for the day this would happen. I half expected insults or avoidance, but when I finally called him, his tone was disturbingly friendly. "You must be Curtis," he said, like we were catching up over drinks. There was a pause. I could hear him exhale. "Look, man, I didn't mean for things to get messy. Hallie told me you were, separated. Did she also tell you I paid her car insurance 2 days ago?" I asked. He didn't respond at first. That silence. It wasn't guilt. It was calculation. "She said things were complicated," he finally muttered. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the framed photo of Hallie and me from 2 years ago, her smiling like she didn't have a single secret. "She sent you pictures," I said. "She did. And voice messages." "Yeah." "She told you she loved you?" "Yeah." I closed my eyes. I needed to hear it. I needed to confirm what I already knew but couldn't emotionally digest. Mason didn't know I had the burner phone. He didn't know I'd seen every message, every selfie, every goodnight baby that was never meant for me. I had spent 2 nights lying awake replaying those texts. She said things to him she never once said to me. She told him he made her feel like liquid fire and that I was a walking sigh. But I wasn't calling him to yell. I wasn't even calling to warn him. I was calling to understand. Because something didn't fit. See, Hallie had always been a lot of things. Vain, impulsive, addicted to attention, but secretive? That was new. She was sloppy with her lies, terrible at cover stories. But this affair had been meticulous, hidden in layers. And the burner phone? It was encrypted. She even had it labeled in her calendar as yoga stretch. That wasn't just selfishness. That was strategy. And Mason? He confirmed my suspicion. "She talked a lot about Cabo," he said. "Yeah, that trip you two were planning with my savings." "I didn't know they were yours, man. I swear." "Why would she even think we had money?" I asked slowly. "We were behind on bills. She left because we were broke. So why Cabo?" That's when Mason hesitated, and his voice dropped. "She said there was something coming. A payout." "A payout?" I repeated. "Yeah, some inheritance. She said it would change everything." My heart sank, because I had only told one person about the inheritance. A week ago, my cousin Max. He was the only one I trusted, the only one I thought wouldn't say a word. But now, that felt naive. The pieces started forming, quickly, aggressively. Hallie left me, then found out about the money, then came back. But not just to fix things. To secure herself, reconnect, reignite, and probably remarry if she had to. She was building a bridge back to my account, not my heart. And Mason? He was the backup plan, or the fall guy, or maybe something worse. I ended the call politely, pretending I appreciated his honesty. But inside, my blood was boiling. I looked around the apartment. Her jacket was still draped over my chair. Her toothbrush was back in the cup next to mine. She was moving back and like it was her rightful territory, like I was the intruder in her emotional story arc. That night, I watched her sleep on my couch, peacefully, as if betrayal didn't wrinkle the soul. I opened her old laptop and plugged it in. If she had secrets, they wouldn't all be in a burner phone. What I found on that laptop, let's just say, her betrayal was only the surface. There were folders, labeled names I didn't recognize, transactions in currencies I'd never used, a document labeled exit plan, and the name Mason? He wasn't the only one. I didn't sleep that night, not even for a minute. I sat in the dim light of my desk lamp, surrounded by the quiet hum of betrayal buzzing from the screen. Hallie slept on the couch just a few feet away, wrapped in the same throw blanket I'd bought her 2 birthdays ago when she cried because she felt invisible. And here I was, completely invisible. On her laptop, I had unearthed what felt like a digital graveyard of deceit. The folders were named innocuously enough: tax stuff, trip ideas, meditation tracks. But inside each one was something that made my skin crawl. The trip ideas folder wasn't full of beach resorts or city guides. It was packed with screenshots of property listings in Bali, Croatia, and the Maldives, not shared between us as dreams, but bookmarked conversations with other men. I found pictures of Hallie in dresses I'd never seen, posing in hotels I never paid for, with captions like, "Last night was magic," and counting the days. I started taking notes. I didn't know why. Maybe to prove to myself later that this wasn't a nightmare, that I wasn't imagining it. One of the men, who went by Bincy72 in her saved WhatsApp conversations, had wired her money. Several times. I traced the deposits. Small enough to slip under the radar, spaced out over months. I clicked deeper. Messages in a tone that chilled me. "Once your husband's out of the picture, we'll move forward. Just keep it clean." Out of the picture? What did that mean? And then I found the file that sealed everything. Exit plan. Docs. It read like a manual for betrayal. Cold. Organized. Bullet points. Phase 1. Emotional withdrawal. Avoid conflict. Let him feel small. He'll detach on his own. Phase 2. Re-establish independence. Reclaim personal space. Remove shared passwords. Delay joint decisions. Phase 3. Legal preparedness. Research no-fault state laws. Secure separate counsel quietly. Phase 4. Financial audit. Monitor account for activity. Look for sudden increases. If inheritance is confirmed, initiate contact. I stared at the screen so long, the letters started to blur. My breathing slowed. My hands felt like they weren't part of me. This wasn't just cheating. This was calculated extraction. A long con, where I was the fool, the target, and the final transaction. I leaned back, blinking away whatever part of me still wanted to believe this could be salvaged. The person I'd loved, or thought I loved, had engineered my emotional destruction as if I were a job she had to finish before retirement. And what hit the hardest? She was so good at pretending to come back. The cookies, the hoodie, the stories about yoga and long nights of reflection. The tearful eyes as she said she couldn't sleep without me. All of it, a performance. She didn't come back because she missed me. She came back because she realized she left too early, before the money had landed. I got up and walked to the window, trying to clear my head, but I felt like I was standing inside someone else's story, not mine. The city outside moved like nothing had happened. Like the world didn't care that I had been emotionally dismantled with a smile and a kiss on the forehead. I turned to look at her sleeping form. Peaceful, serene, as if her brain wasn't a hard drive full of lies. And then, her phone buzzed. Not the burner. Her main phone. I walked over, quietly picked it up, and looked at the lock screen. Mason, did he take the bait? My blood went cold. I unlocked the phone. She never changed the password. Same old Hallie. Careless only when she thought she was in control. Inside was a fresh thread with Mason. He wasn't just confused. He was involved. They were working together. Plotting. Watching me. Testing me. Every sweet gesture from her was being reported back like a spy briefing. He's still quiet. Not sure if he suspects. He let me sleep over. I think I can make him feel like he asked me to come back. That'll make the legal stuff easier. Legal stuff? That's when I saw the document attached to the message chain, a pre-filled power of attorney form. She wasn't just trying to charm me. She was trying to own me. And what they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the inheritance wasn't the full story. Because Uncle Avery had left behind something else. Something no one had touched. Something that didn't show up on a digital balance sheet. A secret account, hidden for years. And only I had the password. The morning after I read those messages, I made her breakfast. Real breakfast, eggs with chives, toasted sourdough, even orange juice with just a splash of cranberry, the way she used to like it. Hallie smiled like a woman winning a silent bet. She took the plate like we were a normal couple again. She kissed my cheek, whispered, "You're too good to me," and sat down at the table like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't plotted to legally bind me with a document that would hand over every asset I had if I died in a car crash or quietly overdosed on sleeping pills. I watched her chew. I smiled. And inside, I was screaming. There was one more thing I hadn't told her. One more thing I hadn't told anyone. When Uncle Avery's lawyer first read the will, he gave me a separate, handwritten note. It was sealed in an envelope marked with one word, only. I didn't open it for 2 days. I thought it might have been a letter about family drama or instructions about his property. But when I did open it, I understood everything. Curtis, if you're reading this, it means the vultures are circling. You'll find a dormant account under the name C. G. Sandwell at Meadow East Trust Bank in Vermont. I've left enough there to disappear. For good. Don't trust anyone, not even yourself. I didn't even know the bank existed. Meadow East Trust didn't have a website, didn't appear on Google Maps. But when I flew to Vermont 2 weeks ago under the excuse of needing clarity, I found it, buried in an old red brick building in a town with one gas station and a post office run by a man who remembered my uncle by name. Inside the bank, I gave the teller a code from the back of the letter. She didn't flinch. She nodded, walked away without a word, and returned 10 minutes later with a key to a private room and a lockbox. Inside, cash, documents, an offshore account number I still don't fully understand, and a black envelope containing one last note. This is your second chance. If you use this for anyone else, you'll lose it just like I did. At the time, I didn't know what that meant. But now I see it perfectly. Uncle Avery had been betrayed too, probably by someone he trusted, maybe even loved. And this hidden treasure, was the emergency exit he never took. But I would. Back in the apartment, Hallie had started humming, folding laundry, texting on her phone while leaning against my kitchen island like it belonged to her again. She didn't know I had her burner phone. She didn't know I had screenshots of every message she sent Mason and 3 other men. She didn't know I had downloaded her entire conversation log and stored it on a USB drive locked inside my storage unit under a different name. And she definitely didn't know I had watched the security footage. Yeah, I forgot to mention, Uncle Avery had cameras. Inside the Vermont farmhouse, on the porch, even around the driveway. I never thought much of it until I visited recently and reviewed the old cloud account out of curiosity. You'll never guess who I saw. Hallie, 2 months ago, standing on the porch of a place she supposedly didn't even know existed, knocking on the door, then leaving a note tucked under a loose panel of the wood siding. I paused the video, zoomed in. Read the note. Let's talk. I can help unlock it. Unlock what, Hallie? She had known about the farmhouse. She had known about the possibility of the hidden money. And worst of all, she wasn't acting alone. Because right there, parked at the end of the gravel path in the footage, was a white Jeep Wrangler. Mason's Jeep. They had gone there together, looking for the backup fortune. And now she was here, in my apartment, pretending we were rebuilding trust over eggs and fake apologies, while Mason was probably waiting for her text to confirm that I was softening. I needed a plan, but not one driven by anger. I couldn't afford that. I needed a plan with surgical precision, not revenge, but a reset. And I had one final card to play, because what Hallie didn't know was that I had just hired a private investigator, not to follow her, but to follow Mason. And the photo he sent me that night was something that made me drop my phone, because Mason wasn't home. He wasn't alone, and he wasn't just her affair partner. He was married to someone who had no idea who Hallie was. The private investigator's name was Walt. Retired Army, subtle as dust, and sharp as broken glass. When I first called him, I wasn't sure what I was even asking him to find. I just knew something didn't add up. And as it turned out, I was right again. He sent me a photo from his car window, grainy but clear enough. It showed Mason, the man who'd been whispering love into Hallie's ear, standing in front of a pale green house, holding the hand of a brunette woman wearing a wedding ring. They were helping a toddler into a booster seat. Walt's message was simple. Thought you said he was single. My mouth went dry. I stared at the photo for 5 minutes, maybe 10. My hands trembled, and not from anger, from this strange, growing emptiness in my chest. Mason wasn't just some other guy. He was a husband, a father, a man with another life, carefully folded and tucked away while he played puppet master with mine. And Hallie knew. She had to know. There were messages on her burner phone where Mason mentioned nap time, where he canceled meetups because of family night, where he referenced a joint account and wifey radar. This wasn't just an affair. This was a pattern, and I wasn't his first experiment. I was just the one with a jackpot. The next morning, I cooked breakfast again. I didn't say anything about the photo. I wanted to watch her face, to really see it, to catch her lies in real time. Hallie asked about my plans for the day, offered to do groceries, and even suggested we take a weekend trip somewhere quiet, just the two of us. She mentioned a new spa resort in the Adirondacks, said she could make reservations, said it would be her treat, with my card. I nodded, smiled, told her it sounded great. She touched my hand and said, "See, this is what I missed. Us being a team." I stared at her fingers. They weren't shaking. They weren't anxious. She had no guilt, just a goal. By noon, I had already contacted Mason's wife, Julia. I didn't send the screenshots, not yet. I didn't want to come off as some vindictive lunatic. I just asked if she knew where Mason had been last Saturday. She said he was at a conference in Syracuse. Funny, that's the same day I saw his Jeep on the security camera at my uncle's farmhouse, with Hallie right beside him. Julia didn't reply after that, but I had planted the seed. The next few days were a blur of staged kindness. Hallie played the perfect partner, cooking, folding laundry, even lighting candles after dinner like she used to. She brought up joint accounts again, said we should think about our financial future. I told her I needed time. She gave me a tight-lipped smile, one that didn't reach her eyes. That night, I sat on the edge of the bed watching her sleep. I couldn't help but wonder, when had she actually started hating me? Was it before I lost my job? Before the money dried up? Or had it always been there? Quiet, simmering contempt for the man who loved her too hard and achieved too little? I wasn't what she wanted. I was never exciting, never impressive, just dependable. And once I stopped being useful, she tossed me like a receipt from something she regretted buying. But now, she wanted me back. Or rather, she wanted what was in my accounts. She didn't know that every single one of our shared cards had been disconnected, that her name had been wiped from everything, that I had already changed the will. She also didn't know that I had scheduled a trip, but not to the Adirondacks. Back to Vermont, to the farmhouse. Because in the lockbox, under the pile of cash and Avery's cryptic instructions, was a second envelope I hadn't opened yet. I wasn't sure why I waited. Maybe I was scared. Maybe I was holding out hope that things weren't as dark as they looked. But now I knew. I wasn't just dealing with betrayal. I was walking through a maze built by two people who saw me as a vault with legs. A man to be bled dry with a kiss on the cheek. So I opened the envelope. Inside was a single Polaroid of Hallie, from years ago, standing beside Uncle Avery, smiling. And on the back, in his handwriting, "This one's a charmer. Keep your eyes open, kid." My heart stopped. She had known him. She had met him. Years ago, before we were even married. I must have stared at that Polaroid for over an hour. The faded colors, the worn corners, the unmistakable smirk on Hallie's face. Younger, maybe early 20s, her hand looped through Uncle Avery's arm like they'd known each other for years. He looked awkward, even then. A forced smile, half turned from the camera. But she looked exactly the way she did now when she got what she wanted. There were so many questions spinning in my head I thought I might pass out. Had she dated him? Manipulated him too? Was she the reason my uncle lived like a recluse for the last decade of his life? Had he left everything to me not just out of guilt, but as a warning? I flipped the photo back and forth, hoping some part of it would explain itself. But nothing did. I knew one thing, though. She had lied to me about everything. About knowing Avery, about where she'd been during our separation, about her feelings, about Mason. And now that her web was fraying at the edges, I decided it was time to light a match and watch the whole thing burn. That night, I invited her out to dinner. A real dinner. White tablecloth, candlelight, 2 glasses of red wine already poured when she arrived. I wore a blazer. One she used to complain was too stiff, and she wore a little black dress she hadn't touched in years. She looked radiant, smiling, glowing, dripping with rehearsed affection. She thought she'd won. Thought I was crawling back to her, tail between my legs, ready to rebuild us. We ordered the chef's special, shared a bottle of wine, and laughed like we were on a second honeymoon. I made her feel safe. I made her feel victorious. And then I handed her the gift box, wrapped in simple white paper. A red ribbon. She looked surprised. "What's this?" she asked, voice light, eyes curious. "Just something to show I've been thinking," I replied. She smiled again, slower this time, with that smug underlayer. The same one I saw the first morning she came back to my apartment with cookies and a plan. She peeled back the paper carefully, like it was delicate. She opened the lid. Inside, a stack of printed screenshots. From her burner phone. From Mason. From the offshore transfer receipts. From the folder labeled Exit Plan. She didn't move. Didn't blink. And then she looked up, dead in the eyes. "What is this?" she asked quietly. "You tell me," I said, sipping my wine. She glanced around. There were people at nearby tables. A waiter clearing glasses. Soft jazz playing in the background. It was all so polite, so civilized. And yet the moment she opened that box, the world shifted. She didn't deny any of it. Didn't stammer. Didn't scream. Instead, she smiled. Cold and calculated. I guess that saves me the trouble of pretending. There it was. The switch. No more sweet Hallie. No more sorries. Just the woman behind the curtain. Sharp, smug, and now slightly annoyed she'd been outplayed. "I assume you've taken steps to protect your precious inheritance," she said. "I have," I nodded. "And I assume this little confrontation is supposed to be the part where I beg, or cry, or spiral." "No," I said, leaning forward. "This is the part where I tell you I've spoken to Mason's wife." That got her. A slight twitch in the jaw. A tightening in the fingers. I sent her everything. The texts. The photos. Even the footage of you and Mason together at the farmhouse. "You remember the camera by the barn door, right?" "You're bluffing," she whispered. "Am I?" She sat back in her chair, calculating. I could see the gears turning, running damage control in real time. But she was losing altitude fast. "You ruined everything," she hissed under her breath. "No," I said softly. "You ruined everything. I just stopped pretending not to notice." She stood up, clenching her purse like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. "This isn't over." I smiled, picked up my glass, and said, "It is for you." She left the restaurant without another word, her heels clacking down the marble like gunshots. People turned to look, whispering. I just sat there, drinking my wine, feeling emptier than I'd ever imagined. Not victorious, not free, just hollow. Because even after everything she did, I still remembered the nights she'd lay her head on my chest. The way she used to laugh at my dumb jokes. The way we used to be two people, not a plan and a target. But she made her choice. And now, she'd face the consequences. The next day, I got a text from Julia, Mason's wife. Only 3 words. "Thank you. Call me." I didn't know what to expect when I called Julia. I was nervous, not because I feared confrontation. I'd had enough of that. But because I wasn't sure if she'd see me as an ally or just another reminder of her husband's betrayal. But the moment she answered, her voice wasn't angry. It was calm, controlled, tired, maybe, but not defeated. "Curtis," she said, "I've been waiting for this." We talked for nearly an hour. She'd had her suspicions for months. Late-night meetings. Inexplicable hotel charges. A locked drawer Mason kept under their bed. She'd brushed it off as midlife restlessness. She never thought it was systematic. She never thought it involved someone like Hallie. I shared what I had, and in return, she told me things I hadn't known. About Mason's past affairs, about similar patterns with other women, and most importantly, about his financial behavior. Turns out, he'd been slowly draining money from a joint investment account. Not for his child's future, but for his second life abroad. With Hallie, their plan wasn't just to sneak off to some island and sip cocktails on stolen funds. It was deeper than that. They were plotting to build a new identity somewhere far from consequence. But not anymore. Julia filed for divorce the next morning. She froze their accounts. She confronted him in front of his boss. By the end of the week, Mason had been fired, evicted from his home, and left with a duffel bag and nowhere to go. And Hallie? She tried one last time. A voicemail. Breathy, almost trembling. "I don't even care about the money anymore. Just talk to me. Please. I don't know who I am without you." I didn't reply. Not out of anger, but because I had nothing left to give her. That night, I packed a single bag. I drove to the farmhouse in Vermont. Alone. For the first time in what felt like years, I slept without fear of someone sneaking around behind my back. The next morning, I stood on the porch in flannel and bare feet, coffee in hand, watching the fog lift off the field. It was quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't beg to be filled. I had lost a marriage, but I'd found something better. Peace. Closure. A second chance. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need anyone else's destruction. I just needed to remember who I was, before Hallie turned me into a ghost of myself. Now, I live off the grid most of the year. I grow tomatoes. I write bad poetry. I volunteer at the local animal shelter. I don't check her social media. I don't follow up on Mason. They're part of a life that doesn't belong to me anymore. And you know what? I'm okay with that. Thanks for listening to my story here on Reddit Confessions. If you made it this far, I want to ask you something. Have you ever experienced a betrayal that ended up setting you free, even when it hurt like hell at first? Drop your story in the comments. Someone else might need to hear it. And if you enjoyed this confession, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stick around. There's always more to uncover here on Reddit Confessions. Until next time.